So this is the plugin that I want to rebuild. It's called Prioritab, and it's essentially a to-do application with 3 columns. Um, Fairly basic in functionality. It's exactly what I need. I use it regularly. Every time you open a new tab in Chrome, it opens up and it's in your face in that way. The issues with it is it was created a while ago and there haven't been any real updates, and it's a bit rough around the edges, and it's a great project to build from scratch. Let me demo the plugin. So I open a new tab and it comes up automatically. Up top, it's got the time and the date, and then it also shows you the progression throughout the day. And then the crux of it is these 3 columns: today, this week, and this month. I can add an item by clicking options and then new task. I can delete a task by clicking this delete icon here. And then I can mark it as completed. I can edit it. And I can move it around. Now you can see that the mouse icon is up here and the card is down there. So it's a bit rough around the edges in terms of the UI and a perfect app to rebuild. So let's get into it. I'll start off by creating a new Vite application. I do have a name, Toodaloo, and we're going to do Vue and TypeScript. To begin, I'll also initialize the Git repo so I can save things as we go along. Initial commit, and we're good to go. In order to get this application as basic as it is right now, in order to get this application into Chrome, I'll need to create a manifest file, and I'll put it in the public folder. And in the manifest file, we'll define some configuration for the app itself. We'll have to give it a manifest version, which is the version of this file itself, a name, Toodaloo, description, and in your face to-do app. A version number, we'll go with 0.1 here. And here I'll have to tell it how I want it to interact with Chrome. I can either have a pop-up in Chrome, it could be a content script in the background of a select number of sites. And in my case, I want to override the new tab functionality and override it with the index.html. And this should be enough. Now, if I go in and build the app, in my dist folder, I should see the manifest file, and I can go ahead and install it in the Chrome extensions. I have my developer mode turned on. Load unpacked. I'm already in the Toodaloo directory here, and the dist folder has my manifest.json. And now if I open a new tab, there we go. It comes up and there's the application. Now the issue is, for example, if I go to app.view and I change something in the file, say I get rid of this image up top and I save, I would first have to build the plugin again, go into Chrome extensions, reload it, and now that image is gone. And that would be the cycle, which isn't very helpful. I could develop the entire application as your normal Vue application, get the functionality of hot reloading, and then in the end connect it back into Chrome. However, there is a plugin that makes all of this a bit easier for us. It's called CRX Beat plugin. And if I get into the site, it has the features that we need in order to get started. And in the get started, it's set up for React and vanilla JavaScript, with Vue coming soon, but we can follow the React instructions and get it into our application here. So I'll install the plugin and also get this configuration into the Vite file. have to go CRX. Manifest and set that up. My manifest isn't in the right place, so let me move it from the public folder into the main folder. And now, instead of building the app, I can go in here and run it as yarn dev like I would for a normal site. Let's go back into Chrome extensions and reload. It's still in the same dist directory. And now if I go into app.view and make a change, for example, let me remove TypeScript from here and save. And now it's hot module reloading right into the site. Great, now we can get rid of the default items here and get started with our actual application. First, I'll want to install Tailwind because that's what I'll be using for styling. Get these plugins in. But first, I'll install Tailwind, which is what I'll be using for styling purposes. Installing these plugins. And initializing. And I will have to go into the Tailwind config and get these content files configured. Get my index. .css and copy this configuration and then get this into my main.ts. Right now, if I do yarn dev and get into app.view, I should be able to add, for example, a div with some styles. Just for testing purposes, I'm just going to go green 500 and give this a full screen height and screen width. Get back in here. Okay, so now I have Tailwind configured. Let me get some of these settings into the index.html file. And for the background, we'll have a slight background, PG50, and text base for all the text sizes. And I can come in and delete this. I'm already seeing the changes pop up here, which is great. And now I can start to think about what I want here and how I want it displayed. So first, let's start with some structure of the data, styling the columns and the items, and then take it from there. So in this case, I'll say, give it a data object that I'll use to render everything. We'll have multiple columns, so column arrays. Each column is an object. Give it a name. And for me, I wanted now, next and later as my columns. Each of them will have a list of to-do items, and each item will have a description. State, let's say new, and then I'll have another one to say done. Oops. another item. And maybe that's enough for me to get started styling. So first I will loop through my columns. And the key can be the column dot name itself. And okay, let me have a div with just the name and see that working. Great. Let me add the rest of the columns so I can see everything happening all at once. Call this next and call this later. Perfect. Let's give the columns a bit of styling. So first of all, let me have a container for these columns. And maybe center some of the things here. So justify center. Give some spacing between the columns. And now I can style the columns. Medium rounding. Let's give it a background of slate 100. Padding, maybe padding Y of 4, padding X of 4. I'll start off with 4 for both of these. I can barely see the roundedness, so let me add a shadow as well to make that more distinguished. Let's give these a fixed width as well. Maybe a third, maybe a fourth actually, just so it fits in there. Great. And let me add some padding up top so it's not stuck. Okay, now let me style the items, the list. And the key can be, okay, I'll need to add an ID of some sort for the items. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and delete the rest here because I have my columns there and I can just work with the first one and not have to add all the IDs. Great, and now let's style these. In each one, I can have some spacing in here automatically. And then let's give these some styles. Maybe some of the same thing. I can maybe take the background of the normal page, medium. Oh, I'll give it some padding as well. That doesn't look too bad. Maybe give this a shadow as well. Okay, great. Now we have our items and we have our columns all displaying. Let me add a little bit more spacing here. All right. Now I think I can get into building in some functionality. Let's start off with adding items. So for that down here, in each column, I can have a section where I can add items. Let me add an input field. And a button. style these a little. I would have expected this to have jumped to the end. I think I need to do items end instead because I've done flex column. Give this a full width and some styles as well. All right. And actually, let me just add some padding there and then style my button. Actually, I'm not going to style the button at all in this case. I'm just going to keep it as is. There's a couple ways I can go about this. I'll start off first by maybe doing the typical view way. If I had new description as a field, I can create a reference, make this empty. And then I can also make this entire thing a ref because I'll want it to change the template as we go. Import ref from view. And then I can begin to use vModel to get the new description. And as I type it in, let me just put that value down here. So now I expect as I type something in for it to show, and I'm not seeing it. Oh, there it is. For some reason, I did have to refresh there, and that might be a little quirk in the plugin. Now, the issue with this, as you can see, is each column has its own input field and values. So I'm going to do something a little old school, which is I'll add a form. And on submit, I'll do submit.prevent because I don't want the form to refresh. We'll get these items into the form. I'm not going to use vModel here anymore. And let's say add item and go ahead and create an add item function here. Won't need this reference anymore either. And by default, view will pass me an event. So let me just log that event and take a look. So every time I add something, my styles have gotten messed up because I created the form, and I'll fix those in a bit. I get a submit event with a target of the form itself, and I'll use that to grab the data inside the form. So first, let me do a couple things here. Give this a type, so making that happy, and then my styles here. Come in here, and maybe I can just remove them from here. Okay, great. And I do want to create some separation. So let me just add some padding up top here just to create some separation between the items and then the add form. And every time I want, I'm getting an error here. I am curious to take a look. Okay, so view for some reason expects a pure event and not a submit event. That's fine. I will change this to event to make a view happy, and maybe later on, if there's any issues, I can deal with it. In order to extract the data from the form itself, I'm going to use HTML's form data object. And in this way, I should be able to pass form data an element and then grab aspects of that element from the form data object. form data, and I want to use event.target. And none of this is being liked because it wants an HTML form element. So let's give it that. And now let me see if I can get the description from form data.get description and console.log the description. Not the typical way a lot of forms are submitted in Vue applications, but great. That's my description right there. Another thing I'm noticing is this autocomplete happening when I click into the form of maybe other description fields that I've filled out in the past. So let me fix that. I believe I can say auto complete as off. And now when I come in and I click here, I had to refresh the page again. So now when I come in and I click here, that's gone. So now I can go ahead and now have the description. I can go ahead and add it to the columns here. And the way I'll do it is by passing in the column. So I'll pass in the event by default, and I'll also pass in the column that I need to add this information into. And then in my function here, this might be a good time for me to add a column type. Maybe I can just copy that from here. Oops. Should just be able to yank that straight up and define columns. So interface column. And an array of lists, that's great. And I can say that this is my entire data object. Actually, I can define this as a ref here. My entire object has columns, which is a column array. And let me pull in ref from view. And that gives me types for my column, which I can use here. And then I can say something like this: column.list.push. And I'll need to give it an ID and a description and a state. In this case, it'll be new. And here I can define specific states. New and done really might be the only ones that I end up using. And it doesn't like description for some reason. Right, because it's not exactly a string precisely. So let me make that a string. And let me just give this a fake ID for now, and I will fix that in a bit. So now when I come down here and add a new item, if I press enter, there it is, that's my new item. I see that the contents here remain, and I want to remove those every time I do that. So let me do that here. I should be able to do event.target, which is my form, .reset. And this won't like it. So let me define maybe the form itself as event.target as HTML form element. And then I can just say form down here, and over here, I can say form.reset. So now when I type in new item, the form gets cleared up, and I can actually continue adding items as I need to. Perfect. So now we have the add item functionality working. I will need one thing, which is a unique identifier every time I do this. Let me add a library called unique ID. And for my purposes, this will be good enough. Import unique ID from unique ID. it doesn't like it because I need to add types to it as well. So let me do that. And now I can use this down here. And that should give it a unique ID every time. Let me take a look at the error with data now. And it doesn't like, I guess it doesn't like whatever I have in here. Huh. What doesn't it like exactly? Is not assignable to type ref columns column array name. It's not telling me what exactly is missing, so it's a bit hard to maybe if I remove everything here. It's probably something inside here that's not making it very happy because it was missing from the state was probably either not. No, I actually don't know what it was. I think I'm happy with that for now though, as my errors are gone and I have the ability to add an item to my list. Everything is gone from here now, but if I add a new item, there we go. One issue obviously here is every time I refresh, that stuff disappears. So let me use a local storage to store this information. Okay, so what I need is every time I save or every time the data changes, I need to store things in local storage. But otherwise, on my first refresh or my first load, I want to load that information from local storage as well. Let me go with storing into local storage. I'm going to use the watch function from Vue. Composition API. Let's take a look at how that works. There's two ways to do it. There's watch effect and watch. And for our purposes, I'm going to use watch because there's, I believe there's less work, quote unquote, to be done. So I'll say watch over data, and then whatever the data value is, whatever it changes to will be passed in here. So new data. And now I want to use local storage in order to save it. So local storage saves things as a string. So I can set item to the app data. And I will have to stringify everything before I save it. And I should be able to do something like this. Let me get watch from Vue. And then let's test this out. So if I refresh here, let's open this up. Under application, let me load local storage. If I say new item, I would have expected to see this being changed, which it is not right now. So let me go in and take a look. Now, one thing I might have to do is change this to reactive, which is a different type of object in Vue. And this is no longer a ref, but I wonder if that is fine. A ref would need data.value, which is not what I have in this case. So I'm going to get rid of this. And I'll give this an object here for now, and then let's see if that fixes it. And it does. So watch will watch over a reactive object. If we just pass it in, we have to do a few different things if it was a ref. But for now, we have this being saved here, and I can see my new ID coming in too. Oops. Another item. And now when I refresh, it doesn't load up because we don't have the code to load things in. So let's work on that right now. So by default, I want to load my data and pass it in here. Okay, so what I'll do is, because I need these columns as my default, I can just take this and have default data to start. And get the default data in here. So now this will work as normal. And then I can load the data otherwise from local storage. Get item. And this will come in as a string first. So great. So storage data is equal to, if a string exists, let me JSON.parse it. Otherwise, I'll use default data. And then here I can just say local storage data. Great. And automatically now I have my items coming in here, and I can add new items. Okay, what do we do next? Next, perhaps I can mark items as completed. And for that, I'm going to pull in some icons, and I'll use the unplugin icons plugin for Vite. And this gives us access to thousands of icons, probably just being used the most simplest of icons for the project here. So let me install that. In addition to this, I'll also need to install the icon collection itself. I could install specific icon collections, but in this case, that happened fast enough. And we'll need to configure it in Vite. Oops. And in plugins, I'll have to say icons. And I guess I don't need to give it any configuration unless, so this is Vite view 3. There you go. Okay. I don't believe I'll have to give it that information, but let me tell it that the compile is view 3. And I'll need to give type declarations as well. And that should be it for the setup. And now I should be able to use the icon. So let me pull in the one that it has for example purposes. Material account box. Gives me an error to start, but some of these might be ignorable for our purposes. And let's see. So I want the icon here, so I click on it and it can mark the item as done. So they'll go right here. I could probably convert this to a span. oops, let me get the actual icon here as it's used. I probably won't use the styles. And I do actually like this format of component usage for components that aren't default HTML components. Okay, great, there we go. All right, let's style this up a little. That looks a bit weird in terms of this looks like it's not quite there. So let me items center first to see how that looks. A bit better, but also maybe not quite there. So if I have something super long, that's definitely not how I want it. There are a few ways I believe I can tackle this. I believe I can give it a flex none, which will limit it. Otherwise, I can also put this into a button, which is really what it needs to be for accessibility and normal web purposes, since we will be driving an action, and now it retains the size because the button is what's being flexed, as it were, and I kind of account boxes inside that button. Okay, I still don't like the centering here, so I do want to pull those up and maybe give this button a margin up top. That looks almost fine. A pixel margin, that doesn't. And maybe I can use views dynamic functionality here. I think that looks just fine. Move back to 3. A couple of pixels is just what I need off the top in order to make it look nice. All right, so now on click, let me make this done. And I can probably, since we're using Iconify and we're using material design, let me just get material design icons that I want. So this one is checkbox blank outline, and this one is checkbox marked. These are the ones I'll use. Checkbox blank outline. Icon checkbox blank outline, and then the other one is checkbox marked. Okay. All right. Based on the state, I'll need to display a different one, and I can perhaps, there's probably 2 ways I can go about this. For now, let me just get the default one in there, and then I can change it. I can refactor it in a bit. I want the blank outline if the state is not done. Oops. And then otherwise, I want to use the marked one. Okay, that looks good. And on click of this button, if I can change item dot state is equal to item dot state is done, then I want to make this new. Otherwise, I want to make it done. And maybe I can just get away with this being right here. That should be a question mark. So now when I click, that gets stored and it changes. Okay, awesome. I could probably even just leave it like this. I don't have to use a dynamic component here because all the action and styling is happening up here. Now, based on the state, I can add a custom class here. So Tailwind strike through, I believe. Line through. Okay. Is on item.state being done. Okay, amazing. All right, we have stuff being marked as done. If I refresh this, that works. There is something I want to quickly check, which is if I just had one long string, whether that would display fine. And that would not display fine clearly. So I need to break the words here. So and I want to break words. Okay, that does not seem to have worked. Sometimes certain CSS commands are a bit finicky, and I recall reading for some of them that they need a width by default. So let me just give this a min width of 0. And that works. That's the oddest thing, right? But apparently break words, I believe, needs a width, even if it's 0, for it to work. Okay, now we have that functional. Maybe now I'm curious about getting the drag and drop functionality so I can move items from one column to another. And for that, I'm going to use a library called Draggable. And if we look at the demos, it's exactly what we want. Into lists, I can move items over and back, and it changes the information in here. Let me actually load this up as well. And let's just install it. Okay, I could probably just copy this and modify it to what I need it to be. Here's my list items here, and instead of that, I believe I'll do draggable. And so my V model should be my column.list. So my items is V model. My group is just going to be items. Start and end, I don't believe I'll be using that here. And my item key is going to be ID. And this will give me an element, which will end up just being this. So I don't have to do this here anymore. And I can get rid of that. Now I can do one of two things. I can either change item, all of these to elements, or I can destructure it so that it gets picked up. And I believe that should be it. So now when I open a new tab, well, there is a problem here because all my things disappeared. Failed to resolve component draggable. All right. So I do need to import it. Okay. Great. And now I expect this to these to be draggable. I lost my spacing. So let me fix that. There's a space Y4 here, but maybe I can just add that in here. And that's good. I don't really believe I need that there. I'm losing some of that spacing from here, so let me add MB3 maybe, that's good enough. All right, now these should be draggable. And if I move new item to the bottom and A up to the top, or maybe even into a new column and refresh, all that is being saved because we're using V model over here and we have a watch, and every time that changes, all that functionality in the backend is working magically for us. There are a few style changes that I want to make here. So I guess I will use drag after all. So because when I start dragging, I kind of have to find the exact spot here that I can get that in there, and that's not very usable. And I think I can probably do some styling based on the item that's being moved. So let me go ahead and do that. Maybe there'll be some clues here. No, there aren't. I'll be using a ghost class configuration. So let me do that in Draggable. And here I can add some styles. Ghost. And I'll still use Tailwind for this. So I'll use the apply directive. And maybe I can change the color to something darker and change the opacity to something fairly low as well. So that'll give me an indication of the item being dragged. That looks a little too light. So let me just give this a bit more background. Okay, 440 doesn't exist. Okay, that looks pretty good as I'm dragging that around. Another thing I want to do is bring back the at start. Draggable. And instead of drag, let me call it dragging, just as a active thing. And this, I do want it to be a ref, and by default, it'll be false. And then I can have a style for the columns here or for draggable. Let me actually give this a min height. Another place I can use the custom Tailwind functionality. Maybe 30 pixels or so if there's dragging happening. Okay, so I could probably just add a bit more styling to this. Let me actually make this 40 pixels so there's more space, and I can have a different background, maybe 200 in this case. So now when I drag it, great, there's a spot here where I can drop it. A bit more of the background is changing here, but I think I'm okay with it. Let me just make this similar to the rest. So make this rounded and maybe give it some white padding as well. Let's see how that turns out. Okay, that's pretty nice. I actually don't need that white padding. That's excessive. I don't love it. Although there is, I mean, it's nice because I know exactly where to bring it in order to drop it into that column. Which is fine. I think I'll leave this for now. That's okay. Okay, I have my drag and drop functionality working properly. Maybe now I can jump into edit and delete. Okay, let's do delete first, as that should be simple enough. So let me, I guess on hover, add some options here. This is the template. And inside, I could probably have a div here. Or options or whatever. I'll want this to be absolute, maybe in the top right. And then I'll need to make this relative in order for that to work. Okay, great. So now I can just style it and then I can make the hover functionality happen later. So give this a padding of 3 maybe. I will need to give it a background. And let's give it the same background that the card itself has. And maybe bring down the opacity to something like 40. That's too little. Maybe 80. That's not bad. Actually, I can probably go pretty high here. And that should be fine. Although I'm seeing this happen where it's exceeding the card's height. And I wonder if I can say something like h full here in order to limit that. Max h full. Okay, because I didn't like it coming all the way down here either. Maybe that should be good enough, and I can just add some icons here. Okay. Let's get some trash in there. Trash can. And the other icon for editing can be there must be something simpler. Okay, this is good. Or since I'm going with the dark theme here, file edit. That should be good enough. File edit. And then instead of options, I can have my icons. And this will be trash can. And this one will be file edit. Okay, that's not at all how I want it to look. Maybe I will need to make this a flex. Okay, that looks better. And I'm looking at this and I feel like I want these on the bottom instead of the top. And you want this to be red. Okay, great. A bit darker. All right, I want these to show up on hover, and I believe I can do that with Tailwind by making this a group, and then over here I can say group hover. And by default, it's hidden, which means that when I hover, I don't see it. Ah, okay, that's fine. I will, I got my CSS mixed up. So it needs to be hidden and everything, and it's going to be flexed in this case. So now when I hover, I can see my icons. Great. And these will be buttons as well. So let me add some wrapping. Okay, and now when I hover over, the icon should change, or the cursor should change. And I want to delete this item. And I believe I can, so let me pass it the column I wanted to delete it from, and then the list index. which I can get from here. And then I can add my function here. Column, and then list index is a number. And column.list.splice list index, and I just want one item to be removed. Is that it? Okay, let's take a look here. Let's get rid of this big one and this completed one. Okay, that's it, it seems. New item, another one, and deletable. Perfect. Let's move on to editing. So I want to come in here, click on edit, and see my form, submit, and edit it. So for my purposes here, I'm not going to do a whole bunch of component refactoring. What I'll do is simply copy paste this form because I know I want that form to display instead of my template here. And I will need a way to indicate that this item is being edited. Can I do that? Okay, that's fine. So maybe I can do something like item.editing, and then at the end here, it'll be else. And so by default, obviously the item's not editing. And then this will have to be edit item, column list index. But first I'll have to indicate when something is being edited. So, no, not this. Let me change it in the item itself. Editing equals true. And that should have some indication of the item being edited. And this flips. I actually don't want the whole thing. So maybe if this can come outside. I'm not sure whether the plugin will like two items being displayed. And maybe it doesn't. So the way I can do this, because this is my entire group div, I could probably just make a template based on the inside. So let's do that. Let's bring this back in. And this could be a template. And the VIF will go inside that template. Move the form inside this template. And then have another template for this div here. Or these whole thing, everything in here can jump inside that template. Okay, so because this is being edited, so let me add a new item. This would look like this, and then the edited version would look like this. I do need a way of getting out of this, and also I don't need the space here, so let me figure that out. In order to get out of this, I can add a cancel button. And I'll need to give it a type of button so it doesn't trigger the form by default. And on click, item.editing is false. And I do want to style this properly. Okay, not what I was expecting. I don't think that will fix it either. Okay, I'll just take a look. But if I do click cancel, it does get canceled. And And then if I click here, it will get edited. I need to populate this with the value of the description. Oops, that's some weird autocomplete. So let's try that again. And we will go through the autocomplete this time. And now let me figure out what's happening with the styling here. That's the entire div, and my form is inside it, and my form is like this. And there's some extra space. Maybe I can just make my form full width. And that does the trick. And then for my, here I can make this save. And I've made this flex row justify between. My expectation would be that these two buttons would be on the flip side of each other, which they should be. Okay, that's odd. That should be the case where these two buttons are on opposite ends. Let me just see what happens if I remove that. Same old. Let's try justify start. It just seems like they're not, that entire div is not flexed up. So let's take a look. It's probably because of this items end I have here. And if I do between, that's my expectation. So I'm getting that by doing this flip side here. I want to change some styles here. So let me make this extra small because it's not the active action there. And maybe I can, actually I don't care to style the save button. Okay, great. So now I have my new item thing here. I can cancel, I can edit. And now I want to save what I edit inside edit item. Let me just actually copy this. Let's take a look at the parameters I gave it. Event, because I'll need to grab the description, which I'll just do with some copy pasta here for now. And then the column and the list index. So column.list. List index here. Dot description equals description. I believe that should be it. List index is a number. And then over here, whoops, I should be able to do something like end editing. Saying editing is equal to false. And now TypeScript doesn't like it, of course, because I don't have it defined. And that should appease TypeScript. In this case, if I type something in here, new item changed, press enter, refresh, and now it's been changed. Perfect. So now we have adding items, we have moving things around, we have editing, and we have deleting. We're essentially pretty much done. There is one last thing that I wanted to tackle, which is Chrome has this built-in functionality storage, Chrome storage. And what this will do is, for one, I believe it gives you access to more data than local storage, which isn't really my concern. The functionality that I do like is that it has a sync function. So if you log in as a profile into Chrome, it will sync this data with your profile within Google's account storage. And if you log into a different browser, on a different computer, your data will be synced between those two computers. And that's a functionality I do use because I'm on different computers at different times, and I do want my my items to be stored. So I'm going to grab this permissions for storage and pop that into my manifest file. And then I'll use this where Chrome's sync exists, and I'll use local storage where it doesn't. So let's see if I can get that working. Right, I'm not using count box anymore. And right, so wherever I have local storage, instead of getting it from local storage, I will now get it from Google Chrome sync. So this is my set and this is my get. And I know when I did the live stream for this, I got caught up in this bit over here, and I don't recall how I solved it. So let me grapple with this again. So this is the get bit. Right, so if Chrome.storage is available to me, do this. Otherwise, do this. It doesn't like Chrome. Let me see if I can add Chrome types. Yep. And then I should be able to add that into tsconfig. As Chrome. And I believe on some reload, this should be fine. Okay. Right. So on sync, this function will run and I won't have access to this on the outside. I believe that was my my concern. And then local storage data is not available to me either. So I might be able to do something like this. I can define reactive up here as the default, and then I can change it once I have grabbed the proper information. So I can make this default data to begin, and then once I get my results, I can pop them in here. And once I get my information here, I can pop it in as well. So in this case, I won't have to do default data in here anymore. I can just check to see if I have a string. And then I can just parse it and pop it into the data. I don't know that I can replace the entire data variable. So what I'll do for now is I guess I'll just grab the columns and I'll replace the columns and we'll see how that goes. So I know that the data.columns is equal to this object parse.columns. And then I'll do something similar up here. And obviously this didn't work, unfortunately, but that's fine for now. I'll just try and see whether it works here in the app itself. So we'll grab this and replace that. And oh, okay. So I guess I'm expecting something like result dot, toodaloo. I believe I should be able to do this. And just for debugging purposes, let me console.log chrome.storage as well. I believe. Okay, yeah, this is my log here, and I don't have anything because I'm not storing anything in. So this is undefined, which is great. And then let me replace this here with something similar. Else I want to use local storage. Oops. New data is storing everything in there. That's great. And then if this exists, I want to use set instead on a key value basis. And value in this case is going to be data. I believe I can do that. I know I ran into problems before. I might have to mark this as a raw item for it to save properly, and we can test that out. So this should save, and if it exists here, stored data, then I want to do something similar to here. And it should look something similar to this. Oops. Okay, let's try that out. So in a clean refresh, okay, this is just that information coming in. So let me remove this. If I add a new item, new Chrome item, value is set to this proxy object. And when I refresh, I don't see it. So let me output this information here. And it comes in as undefined, even though when I modify it, new Chrome item value is set to blah. So it is telling me that the value is set. View 3 to raw, or something like that, unref or to raw, which means I'm storing a raw object. I'm not seeing the raw option here. Let me just include it here and see what happens. Yep, it exists here. So let me get this into here. To raw data. Maybe I can just do this here for demonstration purposes. I will probably just remove this. Okay, a new item here. And when I refresh, I'm not getting it. Ah, okay. This is the silliest of things. Because I'm using key here, and it's the key that I'll look for here. So let me just yank that and replace. And now I believe that should work. You don't need those. So my Todo app data is my key, and that's what I'm storing. I'm not sure whether this makes a difference or not anymore. So if I save and I refresh, that wasn't it. Todo app data set on this. I don't see any errors happening on new item here. LOL. Refresh. And it's not there. I don't suspect. Maybe this is causing a problem. I doubt it though. Maybe because I changed my permissions, I need to reload my plugin. Okay, these errors are because of WebSockets, probably because of the hot module reloading Chrome plugin that we have. New item, refresh, and that still doesn't work. Okay, I'm in debug land here. So I got my set. Let me just simplify this actually by using key, like borrowing old key to see if that maybe makes a difference. Which means over here, I'm just using key in all these places. I'd be shocked if this was the fix. And it isn't, so that's good. Store data results. So let me maybe just output all of result, which will give me a better idea of what's happening here. So if I refresh, result is empty, which means it's not saving to begin with. Chrome that serves local. Okay, that's the difference. Okay. Oy. All right, that should be it, which means I copied local instead of sync, and it's sync in both places. We'll just leave this in the video. New item, refresh, and it loads because now it's actually getting this from the synced up data, and I can just change this key back to what I want it to be. And this key here. Would be Todo data. So new Todo item. Another one, yet another one. Refresh this, that saves. Click and drag this, and that works perfectly fine as well. Okay, great. We actually have a functional plugin end to end. It's being stored in Chrome, so if you open your profile, that will work. It also works as a standalone application, which will use local storage. If it doesn't find Chrome storage, you can edit, you can delete, you can mark things as done and move on. And we have a functional app end to end. Thank you for watching.